Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for all the support, all the messages, all the things that you've sent to me, all the things that you've sent to the show. I know I say it and I will always continue to say it. I do truly appreciate that, and I love hearing your guys' thoughts, your input, your questions, and everything in between. And a lot of you who are listening, I know because I've asked, are really big into offense that has a lot of motion and a lot of decision making. And some of you in particular have really talked about implementing a lot more screen work or wanting to implement a lot more screen work to free up, the kind of shots that you're looking for, whether it's on the perimeter, your traditional pick and roll type motion or Spanish pick and roll, whatever it is that you like to run. And so I thought this would be really cool to get into here and talk with my guest who is definitely coaching also some pretty high level athletes as well, which is pretty always fun to talk to hear about the things that he sees and the things that are going on at the level that he's coaching. Specifically, we're kind of focus a lot, I think, on the AAU level that he's at. So we're going to get into using screens, having motion in your offense, talk about implementing it, talking about the workaround that comes in by not being able to practice a whole lot, and a lot of other screen work and teamwork related things as well. So let's jump right into it with my guest. Currently varsity assistant at Park Tutor, as well as EYBL coach for the Indy Heat team. Very happy to be joined by Coach Eddy Wagner today. Coach, again, really happy that we're able to have this chat and you're able to come on and talk to us. How are you today?
I'm good, Coach. Thanks for having me on. This is a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited just to talk basketball.
All right, let's jump into it. Coach, go ahead and start by talking about your basketball journey, your coaching journey. Where has this great game of basketball taken you, and how did you end up both on the AAU side as well as at Park Tutor?
So I've kind of had a weird basketball journey from my playing days. I tore my hip back during my freshman year of high school. I played on it for 2 years because I didn't really come from an athletic family. My parents didn't really know what was really going on. So I just played through a pretty tough injury, I thought, for 2 years, which I kind of struggled through. And I went to a really big high school, really successful high school, and North Central in Indianapolis, and didn't necessarily agree with the coaching style there. So I ended up quitting the team my junior year. Then I came back, tried out again my senior year, thought I was killing it, and then the coach ended up cutting me, just sort of like a pride thing for him. But I ended up still getting recruited, not ever playing a minute of high school varsity basketball. I ended up going to play D3 at Hanover College just for 1 year. Then I ended up transferring to Indiana State, where I tried to walk on. They already had their preferred walk-ons. And then I actually got with the women's side, and I started as like a male practice player. They kind of saw that I knew a little bit about basketball and I was somewhat decent, and they brought me on as a manager for that season and then the rest of my college career. And that's kind of where I fell in love with the coaching side of basketball. And then at that time too, I also was coaching the club team for Indiana State. So I was coaching guys my same age.
Yeah.
One of my best friends, which was kind of weird. Like looking back, it's kind of weird, but
Mhm.
it was really cool because it was an experience that you can't really replicate. So I enjoyed all that. And then actually one of the women's assistant coaches went down to the high school level and was at Park Tutor. And she reached out to me for the boys side because she found out that they had an opening.
Okay.
Excuse me. And so I went in and interviewed. I went in with the mindset like, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I'll stay late. I'll be here early. Just that that young grinding mindset.
Yeah, of course.
So he brought me on just kind of as like the Swiss Army knife. While I was helping out with the varsity, the JV, and the freshman team. And then he saw my work ethic. We really started to click, and then he ended up switching me to the JV coach after 2 weeks, which I was not expecting to do. Like, never been a head coach before, and at Park Tutor, I mean, they won 4 out of 5 state championships during the time I was in high school. So this is an elite program at the time. So it was a heck of an experience for me. And at that time, my AAU coach was coaching with Eric Gordon's AAU team out of Indianapolis,
Mm-hmm.
which was on the Adidas circuit at the time. So he actually brought me on towards the end of my senior year at college, where I was driving home and flying out to like Dallas, and flying out to California, and doing all this stuff as a college student. And then I was flying back Sunday and then going to class on Monday. Um,
Whew.
so that was it was exhausting, but it was such a cool experience. I wouldn't trade for anything. Um, so I built good relationships there, and then I finally made the switch over to the EYBL 3 years ago now. Um, and it's just been, I mean, EYBL is the top of the top in my opinion. Um, and that experience has been great. Then I bounced around high school wise coaching. I went to North Central for a year, coached with Jason Gardner. If you heard that name, he was an IPY head coach, McDonald's All American. Now he's actually at University of Arizona as an assistant. Went there with him for a year, went back to Park Tudor, and then I went to Lawrence Central for a year, and then I'm now back at Park Tudor again. So I've had a long ride.
I mean, I just hearing that, I imagine the amount that you must have learned and taken in and gotten to learn about the coaching profession. I just imagine you had to have just been like a sponge, kind of taking everything in
Yeah.
and learning from as many people as you possibly could of all of those different stops and things along the way.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what I think I've grown the most because I was a sponge and not thinking I knew everything and just trying to go learn from any and everybody. And something I try to do, I started, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, is on my, because I've always been like a teacher assistant, or now I'm a head PE teacher. On my fall breaks, I go try to just tour local colleges and go watch their practices. And so every year now I'm trying to change up which colleges to go to. If I know somebody locally is recruiting one of my AU guys, I try to go to those and try to build relationships with those guys. To, hopefully lead to a scholarship offer for those guys as well.
Yeah, and I'm just curious then for you with so much exposure to so many different things and so many people that you've worked under, how did you kind of develop your own like personal like coaching philosophy? Did you take a little bit from everyone? Was there certain coaches that you really like identified and vibed with? What was that like?
Yeah, so right now I coach with a guy named Tim Adams, who I coached for one guy before him, before Tim came to Park Tutor. And now I spent most of my coaching career with Tim. And I look at him as a one of my best friends and as a mentor as well. Kind of like a big brother because he's like 10 years older than me and he's young in the coaching game and so am I. Um, but just the way he approaches the game, the details he brings to practice and games, and I've kind of just, like you said, took from the other guys as well to kind of shape my coaching ideas, my philosophy, and also like the bad coaches I've been around. Like I talked about high school, what not to do, because what I didn't enjoy as a player, I don't want to do that to other players as well.
Yeah, yeah. So you kind of have that also there, like in your
Yeah.
mind as well. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's just
Um,
crazy to think back. Like at one
mhm,
point, I quit basketball and I wanted nothing to do with it. And
yeah.
now it's the reason why I got teaching jobs. It's the reason why I've built relationships. Reason why I'm like at the UIBL level now. It's crazy.
Well, it's a good thing to always like kind of think back or be able to remember on because obviously we're so invested in the game and we love it so much that it's almost hard for us to imagine that, people don't. And so to realize like, I remember what it was like when like I didn't love the game and wanted nothing else to do with it anymore kind of keeps you kind of grounded and kind of reminds you to make sure that, we're creating a really positive and worthwhile experience for our players.
Exactly.
So something I'm always curious about is somebody who is not as deep in the club or the AAU scene as others are, but I know, and this is something that you brought up specifically as well before we started
Mm,
officially recording here, is that you know with AAU there's not a lot of practicing going on. It's just the
mm,
logistics of it. It is what it is. There's just not obviously as much practice time as a lot of coaches would like. So for you as a coach, how do you, still maintain success? How do you kind of, have a team that works together? How do you still try and, you know, make things work as best you can, despite the fact that, your practice time is so limited?
for sure. Um, so last year was my first year being a head coach in the EYBL. So my kind of thought process was trying to get the core guys to be local so I can kind of bring those guys together as much as I possibly can. But it, like you said, it's tough because especially with the prep school scene now blowing up more than what it has been in the past. Um, you got guys who maybe go to school out in California, but their home base is Kentucky. So we can those guys that have their home address is Kentucky, we can bring those guys in, but they might not be in Kentucky until, certain weekends or whatnot.
Mhm.
Um, my one of my starting point guard last year is from Cleveland, which is about 5.5 hours away from Indianapolis. So it was tough for him to get to practices in Indy because that's where we're typically Indy or Fort Wayne is where we're based out of. Um, but something I try to do, I was just bouncing ideas off of different coaches, which I try to put together a playbook for the guys where I have all these plays drawn out, stuff I could draw out of ATO, our flow, our motion offense, our baseline plays, and I try to look up like links to those offenses on YouTube, so those guys can go
Mhm.
watch those clips, or we have access to Synergy. Um, so I'm just trying to use all those resources to make it easier for those guys to learn plays. Just because we're only together, I think before we go to UIBL, I think we only end up having two practices or 2 weekends of practices, which we bring those guys in on a Saturday. We either get them a hotel or I had kids stay with me at my house last year, and then we practice Sunday morning, and then they get back and they go home. So just trying to make the most out of the weekend and uh, use, like we said, synergy is huge to have,
Mhm.
especially when we're on the road, when we're watching film, when we're scouting. I came across Fast Scout 2 years ago, and which is nice is I buy it for the high school season, and then and once high school season gets over, I switch it over to my AAU.
Right over. Yeah.
Yep. So then now I just added all my AAU guys, and a lot of schools don't use it in Indianapolis or in Indiana, I think in general. And I have the mobile access, so then our scouting reports are directly sent to their phones where they can get on the app, and I think that's just game changing, especially since we always have a quick turnaround for all of our games.
Hmm. Yeah, and so you mentioned about like you said like a playbook, right? Like, it's
Mm.
like something that you have. Like how in depth do you get of it? What's the expectation of how much their like knowledge of it is before you really start playing games together? Do you expect them to know the whole thing, most of it? Like what's that level of expectation?
Yeah. So I try to get them to know most of it. I would love being an offensive minded guy. I would love to have like 45 pages in it, but from being together and I have sophomores right now, so they're not to the highest of standard that they're going to be at yet.
Hmm.
So I try to keep it a little bit simple for them, but also effective where they get the basis of the actions and the movements. So then now when they see it live, that it's a little bit easier. But yeah, I would definitely love to make it more complex. But I did that, I feel like, early on in my career where I try to do really complex offensive things, but it didn't work.
How much of that in that playbook, out of curiosity, are things that like are different variations of a certain base that you run? Are they completely like different sets? Is everything kind of a little bit different? Do they kind of run out of like a same sort of like system? What is that like?
Yeah, so I try to keep it the same system. Like all of the baseline plays, I try to keep it out of. Well, last year I was more four low alignments and having different sets going to that. This year we ran a lot of diamond baseline setups, and so I think I'm going to switch a little bit more to that. But I want the basis of our alignments to always be in a diamond, so it's a little bit harder for those teams to scout um,
Mhm.
until the action's getting ran in the play, and then by that time these guys are so talented that it's either going in a bucket or a wide open shot.
So let's move into that now and talk about, Coach. What is your offensive philosophy? What is it that you like to run on offense, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but like, what's the implementation process for this so that your guys know how to run it the way that you want it run?
Yeah. So I'm I really love the flow kind of Euro ball screen motion. Um, but if it does it like this year, just for an example, we ran a little bit of it, but it didn't work at that point. So we were really good with adjusting in the middle of the season to flipping it to something else to what works for our guys. Because I think in high school when I played, we had an offense and he ran the same offense every single year. And I don't think necessarily it was sometimes the best, because I don't think it played to the strengths of his players. And I think now my mindset is like I have to constantly research, like what, like we were just talking about, watching the Illinois and Kentucky game. Is like, what are these guys doing? So now I can kind of take a little bit of that, see how my guys can fit in those spots. So now if Kentucky's watching a couple of my guys play, oh, now they can see these guys fitting into those roles. Um, and then so for practice implementation, uh, we typically, when we practice, we have our 15s, 16s, and 17s all practicing at the same time. So we kind of split up and do our individual stuff. But then towards the end, we kind of come together and either do like a structured half court segment. So then now those guys can get a little bit of 5-on-5 action with it. Because I think 5-on-0 sometimes they don't necessarily retain that information as well because there's nobody guarding them, and then
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
like there's nobody influencing their decision. So it's easy just to throw that backdoor pass or that kick back into a dribble handoff because nobody's guarding it. So I think going live is a huge um, necessity to get it because but in previous years, we've just hopped right into the EYBL, and so if we didn't do too much live stuff against other teams or doing like a pre-tune-up tournament, I think we struggled a little bit. So now that's one thing I was really pushing for this summer was to not go to the first session of EYBL and do a couple local things, either in Ohio or Indianapolis or whatnot, just to get good looks and see what fits and what doesn't fit, or offensively what doesn't work or what does work, and then kind of tuning those up before we get to the EYBL.
So with that, are you with your offense, it's something that I feel there's a lot of timing involved, and like you mentioned, like without time to work together, without time to gel together as a team, timing is so, I feel like, essential to what it is that you run on offense. And
Mhm.
do you feel that like being able to get the timing down of your offense is something that, is you can realistically simulate in a practice situation, or is it one of those things that really kind of shows itself like in a game where you don't really know it until you're going in a competitive situation?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. That's kind of why I like AAU from a coaching standpoint, is because you always have to adjust on the fly. Um, and that kind of you can never get relaxed in an AAU game, in my opinion, because everybody's different. Like we've played against probably future NBA guys last year that you can't really simulate in practice. Um, like we're playing against Knight Riders who have two or three top kids in the 2026 class. And I think I only had one guy in the top 150 in the whole country. So it's kind of hard to simulate that, especially if we're going against a younger team. Um, and then as well as my team is like this summer, I'm really high on a kid named who I have as my starting center is Isaiah Hill, who's a 7 foot kid out of Indianapolis. But he is very unique where he can shoot the ball very well, and he's an amazing rim protector, and just somebody that I feel like he's one in a million that I'll ever get to coach. Um, so I think studying everybody else, like studying the college game, trying to find like players to
Mm.
study so I can make sure that I'm putting him in the right position. So I'm doing my job. Um, whether it be in practice situations or in game situations.
And the other thing that you brought up that I thought is a really fascinating situation, is a really cool situation that you're in, is like you are obviously well aware of the aspirations that your guys have,
Mhm.
and where it is that they're trying to get to. And then also, right, you have an idea of the types of programs that might be looking at them, and the types of offenses that that program runs. So it's an interesting situation, I imagine, for you to be in, where you want to make sure that your guys are ready for where it is that they're ultimately going. So like you said, like you're keeping an eye on what some of these, collegiate level programs are, because I think that, the more that you can do, or, coaches in
Mhm.
general can do to get them ready for what they're going to see in the future and get them ready for that transition to what they might be running, like is really what serves players really well.
Yeah, 100%. I know I love to go watch Purdue's practice. They're always like on the top of my list every time I get to go watch practices. And I got a good relationship with one of their assistant coaches, who is I believe he was my class in high school, PJ Thompson, and they offered the Isaiah Hill kid already. So and they they have 7 footers, two or three of them every single year. So once they kind of wrap up, I'm gonna be really picking his brain a lot.
Uh-huh.
Um, to see what they do well to get his 7 foot. Like he's different 7 footer than they've had in the past. So I'm curious to pick his brain, especially with him being their offensive kind of coordinator. Um, so I think me building those relationships, doesn't necessarily always help me. It always helps. It ends up helping the players as well.
Helps the players. Yeah. Coach, you mentioned screens, and I know one of the things that you really like to do is a lot of drag screen action. There again, a lot of timing involved in that, especially in the transition running drag screens. But I want to start with what goes into setting a good screen. How, as a coach, do you kind of make sure that the screens are set the way that you want them? Like what are your kind of like principles for an effective screen, whether it's a drag screen, different type of screen, whatever types of screens, maybe you have different principles for, different sets of screens, but talk about your kind of screening principles that you have.
Yeah, so what I try to get our, especially my kids at the high school level at Park Tutor is the better screen you set, the more wide open you're going to ultimately get, I believe. So depending on what the set is, like you were saying, I think it depends on the player who's setting it, um, as well as how we scout the other team and how they're going to guard it, and being able to adjust those screens too. I'm big on switching up the screens a lot, whether it be you're sprinting into a ghost screen or you're setting it rolling or you're setting it popping it, because I believe you have to keep the defense, off balance a little bit and not being able to predetermine how they're going to guard it because we're always going to roll. So I love switching it up. I love giving those guys an option of reading it and switching it up as well. I'm looking forward to the Isaiah kid because he can pick and roll, and he's a lob threat, and he can also pick and pop and knock down the three. So at the 5 spot, he's going to be a big problem to have to guard and have to scout. Um, so I think my big philosophy is just being able to switch it up, having guys have the skill level to be able to switch it up, and that's just consistent reps in practice. And showing them film. This is why it's successful. They're hard hedging it, so this is why you have to roll this time. You have to slip it, and then just watching their film from the game before. Being a sponge. That's what I'm trying to tell those guys as well. You guys got to be a sponge from us, from watching games on TV. You know, and because I think that's how they're going to ultimately grow.
So there is a lot of onus then on your players to it seems like make correct reads, right? Or make correct
Mhm.
decisions off of what it is that's is being thrown at them. And so what I get from it is there's needs to be like a lot of meaningful reps, and I really like the idea of like film because I think that
Mhm.
when you focus on something specific like setting screens, it's one thing I think in the moment when you're playing, when you don't have vision of the whole court and what's going on to
Mhm.
to think about how you set that screen and if you did it
Mhm.
well. But your players, when they see it on film and they see like, oh, like this is what oh, there was a hedge here, or I could have slipped this or done this. I'm sure it gets that's the light bulb on of like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, like I see what all these potential options are. If I see this again the next time, they can make a different adjustment off of it.
definitely. Yeah, everybody's a different learner. I was more of a visual learner. Um, so I got to treat all my kids differently. You have to coach each kid individually rather than as a whole, is how kind of my approach. Um, you might be a better, walkthrough person. You might, oh, this is what I meant on this, or compared to, here, let's pull it up on Synergy real quick. Let's see what you did last game and what was successful, what wasn't. Um, and then doing a little bit of both, so that because I mean they have to be able to do both. I think on the next level, um, to really maximize their potential.
Yeah, and with setting a screen, there are, like you said, there's a little bit of like nuances depending on how it's being set in the screener and the ball handler. Everyone's got to be in line. You also said, I believe when we talked, that you also run some Spanish pick and roll, some Spanish set, kind of screening the screener action. Is that something that is takes a while for your group to kind of get down because there's a lot of timing involved, there's a lot of decision making involved? Talk about like how, especially those Spanish pick and rolls and the Spanish screen sets, what is that like for your players to really have that click?
Yeah, I love that set, that alignment. And then when we try to put in a set this year at the high school level for
Hmm.
Park Tutor, and we have D3 kids at best this year, and they haven't really seen that type of action before. Where we go on the EYBL and you see it, almost every other play, just
Yeah.
because the spacing, especially when you got high level guards that can shoot the lights out, it's gonna be kind of hard to guard that set. But when me and the head coach were talking about the set and we go to put it in, a lot of the kids were kind of confused when we looked at it, like, yeah, we want you to screen the 5 man's man. They're like, what do you mean? And like when we did 5-on-0, they were like, I'm almost screening the ball handler as well. And I'm like, no, 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 we have to run it 5-on-5, and then let's walk through it. And now with 5-on-5, now you can see when that big hard hedges it or he switches it, then that's when you back screen him, and then they got big rolls. So I like it because it creates confusion, um, especially when you got the high level guys rolling. When you got a 7-footer rolling to the rim, um, then now you can pop the guard and now you can get a high-low look if they end up triple switching it. So I love that set, and I see it a lot. I see a lot of like the little butt rub screens where the five man kind of is facing the rim. I don't know if you've seen. I don't know what the
Uh,
exact
go,
term.
go through. Yeah, I know. I go through it a little bit more. I think I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
what the term
um,
is.
yeah. So the big is essentially butt to the ball handler who's bringing the ball across half court,
Hmm.
and then basically it's almost like a flat ball screen. And we seen that multiple times last year. And when you got a really high level scoring guard coming off either to the left or the right, um, if you can't switch it or you can't force into his weak hand, it's tough when that guard's getting downhill. So we seen a lot of that last year. I think I'm gonna steal a little bit of that this year for the summer. But yeah, we see a lot of ball screens at the UIBL level.
Do you think, because you mentioned about how the European ball screen, the Spanish pick and roll, that their high school players didn't have as much familiarity or exposure to that? Do you feel it's not something that's conceptually being run because the shooters aren't there for it, and so they don't have that a lot of like experience because the shooters can't really pop out on that and hit the shot, or what is your reason you think why maybe more programs or more players don't have that sort of exposure to it?
Yeah, I just think it's, you have to be a junkie of the game, I think, at the same time, where these guys, I don't know if necessarily our high school kids are watching it as much as, I am, or our high level kids, because when my AU kids are watching this Kentucky Illinois game, they're like, man, the coach just reached out to me, last week. So maybe they're more tuned in. I just think it's a very unique set where they haven't probably seen it because it doesn't play to their skill set. I don't think so. Like kind of like how you're saying with elite level shooters popping up on that.
With your offense, again, kind of going through the other aspects of it, you mentioned about how there's a lot of different possibilities, right? Not setting the same screen each time. There's
Mhm.
there's different screening action that you're going to be running. So, what goes into teaching decision making in an offense when you have an offense that involves on a lot of decisions and being able to read a defense and understand the right decision that needs to be made? How do you kind of work with your guys to kind of help them with their basketball IQ, their court vision, their decision making? What goes into that?
I think consistency of repping it out, and then I think what I kind of fell in love recently was just breaking down small sided games, because I watch a lot of the 3-on-3 tournaments when they come up, and I just love like how they have the small sided actions, especially with the spacing of the full court. But like if we're typically in that flow, that Euro ball screen offense, we'll do it 3-on-3 live and just make them have to try to score off of one side, whether that be we hit the big pop in, the first guard kind of cuts through, and maybe we have a couple sets out of it too. So maybe we kind of break down the sets off of that small side with live defense, and then forcing them to try to score off of one of those sides as well, or off of one of those actions. I'm sorry.
No, well, one of the things I love about small sided or free on free, like you mentioned, is I love how nobody can hide in a three on three. Like
Yep.
everybody has to be active, everybody has to be involved. I obviously, even in my practices, I'll run a lot of 5-on-5 work
Mhm.
because it's stuff that we need to run. But there's definitely that fear of in 5-on-5 players can like disappear, players not really be involved. But in three on three, you don't get that. You have to be working. You have to be constantly finding mismatches or create your own like opportunities for you or your teammate to score because you need everybody out there.
Yep. Yep. And I think it allows us coaches to kind of focus a lot on the details within those three guys. Like you said, because that fifth guy could be in the weak side corner just hanging out because we're more than likely watching the ball and watching the strong side actions. So I really fell in love with the 3-on-3 and just repping it out and then giving them different looks. Maybe bring those guys in, say, hey, now when we hit the five on the pop, now we're gonna do this little stagger action or we're gonna zoom it this time. So then just breaking down some of the ATO actions as well, I think is beneficial.
One of the things that I think is really cool that it seems definitely like you do, and I always think it's cool when any coach does it is put those like simulate situations or simulate things that potentially might happen in a game because what you're bringing up with the different type of screen action, the different type of offense that you run is there's just so many possibilities out there that I think at least this is in my experience like players need to be kind of put into like certain situations of like, okay, we're gonna, run, this particular action, or what if we did this, or how about we do this, what is it that happens? And
Mhm.
so to expose, players to all of these different possibilities, it seems like you're kind of like putting them in those situations when you work with them and practice them so that they can kind of see like, okay, what about when this happens? Then like what is it that we're looking at and what can we do off of this, particular screen or this particular, role or this particular movement, what happens here, and like kind of let them see it for themselves.
Yep, exactly, exactly. Because like we talked about, we don't practice that often, so that two
Yeah.
hours we have together, we're not getting just shots to shoot the ball right now. Like that's what you're supposed to be doing every single day. So now when we're with the team, like we're gonna be really hammering down 5-on-0 stuff. Then we're gonna flow right into 5-on-5 stuff. Then we got to get into game situations. We got to get into press break. We got into baseline. Like so, we really like practice is stressful for me because I'm a very organized person and I'm very um very time oriented. So like I'm thinking about practice right. I'm like, gosh, like this 2 hour practice, like we got to cram in like 3 weeks worth of stuff in like a real high school, real high school situation. Um, so making most of those practices is very, very key.
Yeah, isn't it fun when you make a practice plan or you're figuring out what it is that you want to do and you have all these ideas and then next thing you know you draw it up and you feel like you didn't cover anything. You're like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, what about all
And
this
that's
other
half
stuff I
of
want to
it.
do? Yeah, no, I've been there. So talk about then what goes into your practice planning with, yeah, it's obviously gonna be different when you're working with your AAU guys. It's so limited versus your high school guys.
Mhm.
But with practice planning, what kind of goes into deliberately working on your offense in a practice plan? What are you kind of, mapping out or drawing out in a practice to hit on your offensive principles?
So I was basically our quote unquote director of like scouting and preparation for the games. So I think, in my opinion, I think looking ahead to how they're going to guard us. So if we're playing a team that's specifically 2-3 zone, they play 2-3 zone every day, every game. We have to be really hammering down, these next 2 or 3 days before our game, our 2-3 offense. But I think also sprinkling in a little bit of man offense is beneficial just in case they switch it up because that's why I think what I've noticed on my coaching journey is on our 2A level, it's a lot more strategic, and then on the 4A level that what I've been at, it's a lot more scouting personnel. Because that's where you see most of your D1 kids, your taller kid, your really athletic kids on that 4A level. So I think preparation for scouting kind of forms my mindset on practice plan, as well as how we did last game. What did we struggle with last game? What do we need to work on more? We might need to work on our screens. So we just do a drill or breakdown of just setting great screens, actually hitting on the screens. That's what we struggle with in the high school level is we whiff a lot of screens. Um, so implementing drills where we have pads, the coaches on pads, because we don't have managers at Park Tutor, so we have to do a little bit of everything. Um, Having those guys really hit and make contact and then rolling or popping or whatever we're gonna do to their skill set. But I think the planning going forward, I think our head coach looks back at our games that we just played to kind of see what
Mhm.
what we need to work on better from that. And I'm more of what do we have next? What do I need to work on? What do I need to scout next to kind of merge those two together for our practice plan.
As a coach, how have you kind of developed your scouting over time? What kind of is your like philosophy on scouting and being able to plan and develop a good scout?
Yeah. Um, I would say I'm pretty detail oriented. I try to watch, depending on how much time we have, um, in between games. I try to watch at least 2 to 3 games of each opponent. Um, it's tough when we play like a Friday, Saturday, like doubleheader, especially now with two kids. So it's a little bit harder for me. And then I
Mm,
try to manage as well, like on the weekends, try not to watch any film at home and try to be present at home. So I do during my prep periods teaching. I try to cram in a lot of film. We have huddle. I try to break down, create playlists of all like I'll if we play so and so tomorrow, I'll have all their top 7 to 8 players, like kind of like a highlight reel of them put on our huddle, so those guys can go watch. And our like we talked about, I have Fast Scout where those guys get that scouting report. I try to get at least 2 days before, so they can really look at all the players. I put our
mm.
matchups on there, so then those guys know who they're going to guard, and so they can really kind of hammer down on them. And then what I've also kind of found out by just playing with Huddle and Fast Scout is that I can upload those videos to Fast Scout, and those guys can just watch it all from the app on Fast Scout, and then I
Oh,
can
it's all
track
right
it.
there.
Yep, and I can track it too. So I can say, oh, Coach Mike didn't watch any film on uh, number 22. And then so like but then we get to the point where we're like, all right, man, we're gonna start calling guys out in the film room. Like, this is what your teammate's not prepared. And so I
Yeah.
feel like they're when they feel like they let their teammates down, it hurts them more than they feel like if they let us down.
Yeah, oh, definitely, 100%. Yeah, the shame they feel from letting them down. They'll let me down all they want. They'll no, I'm just
Yeah,
teasing them. But if it's their teammate, then it's like,
for
oh
sure.
no, I know I can't do that.
That's what I
Um,
try to take to PE too. If
oh yeah, yeah,
kids is acting up, I'm like, okay, now the whole class has got to run
yep,
because of you.
yep. Oh,
Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
the when you this is something that we brought up a little bit earlier about screening, and so I was curious about what are other teams doing against screening? Is there a lot of switching? Is there a lot of hedging? What do you kind of see as like the approach that other teams are handling with all the screen action that you're doing?
I think a lot of the teams that I've seen have do a lot of switching. I think when you have the capability of switching 5 ways, it kind of screws up a lot of offense, especially when we switch over to the EYBL, and then now we have a 30-second shot clock, which Indiana, we don't have a shot clock. And so that's a little bit of an adjustment, especially for like the younger groups, the 15, 16U groups. Um, Now you got to play with a little bit of faster pace. Now we like to switch, and then maybe we switch under 10 seconds. So then it kind of creates a little bit of confusion, and now they're forcing up a tough shot. But we see a lot of switching 5 ways because also I feel like with the lack of practices, that might be the easiest thing to do, like the simplest thing to do, like we kind of talked about. I would love to, hard hedge and then recover, but maybe since we only get to practice a couple times, maybe switching 5 ways would be what's best for us. Um, and then also see a lot of trapping. That's something I did last year for my group because I had a 5 man who's pretty athletic. We called it either 4 or 5. So if we're in 4, everybody's switching 1 through the 4 spot, and then our 5 is always trapping any ball screens or handoffs. And then if we're in 5, then we're just switching all 5 ways. So I think we had some success, and I also think it depends on who we're playing as well.
Mm.
If you got a high level guard, like my point guard from last year, who I had, he's committed to Ohio State. He just won actually Mr. Basketball in Ohio. He saw a lot of traps just because guys wanted him to get the ball out of his hands. So then finding ways how to get him back the ball once he had to get rid of it was kind of my mindset last year.
So to add on to that, then what is the key to breaking that when you're getting trapped on a ball screen? What's the best like course of action? How do you? I mean, with such a high level guy like that, I imagine his basketball IQ and his ability to just be a playmaker kind of
Mm,
helps a lot with that. But
mm.
what's the counter in your opinion to when that trap is happening there on the screen?
Yeah, I think depending on where you're at on the court. If you're a little bit closer to the 3 point line, maybe the retreat dribbles are good because then you got space. Now your spacing is a little bit stretched out where you can flash somebody middle, as well as sliding your other guard up maybe to half court. So then now you do have that reversal pass. Um, or you have a high level guard. I think you just really try to attack that big man's outside leg. Maybe you get a little cheap foul on them, and then they have to adjust from there. And then plus, if you get around that trap or that hard hedge, then now you're getting downhill, and now you're playing an advantage game. Um, so I think either retreat dribbling or attacking that big man's outside leg, I think are the 2 best options.
It's fascinating to me as somebody who and I'm on the girls side, so I don't know if it's any different. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's always fascinating to me to kind of watch whether it's in film or even watch when I see my girls do it in practice or whatever the case may be, how many uh how many double teams can be split and how many like are how many don't really have like the good footwork in. And I think that it's something that seems maybe intuitive for our players, like, oh, like go, double team the ball or go double team in this situation. But if it's
Hmm.
not something you're deliberately working on, at least with I know the point guard that I have right now, and she's very tiny too. Like she can split if your feet aren't set right, or your feet
Yeah.
aren't, she'll split right through that, or like you said, use that retreat dribble, get somebody to stand up, like you said, attack the outside leg, and it's interesting that if you have players, and I'm sure you do, who are not phased by a double team,
Hmm.
that they can see how many different type of outs that they have, because at least in my experience a lot of these double teams are not set 100% well.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that's what my point guard last year had a lot of success splitting it. But we try to teach when because we trapped it with our 5 man a little bit too because he wasn't as athletic to kind of switch and guard a guard spot. So we were just like thinking, be aggressive, try to trap, get the ball out of their hands, and then scramble from there. But we always teach you have to be up to touch. So you have to make contact with that guy setting the screen, and you don't leave until that guard is coming over the top.
With some of the looks that you like to get on offense, some of the screen action that you like to get on offense. I know some of that comes out in transition, so I did want to make sure I picked your brain about kind of your transition principles and what you're looking to get. There's so many different things you can get out of a transition. Obviously,
Mhm.
layups, threes, all kinds of reversals, skip pass, this, that, whatever. Tons of stuff that you can get out of it and incorporate screens in as well. So, what are your like best case scenarios in running transition? What do you look for in transition offense to be run the way that you want to?
So I think first, I mean, obviously the guard once the ball gets to the guard, first big is pace, is sprinting the court, getting
Hmm.
to the rim. I think that creates space to start. And then typically your 4 man is either probably going to trail or vice versa, the 5 could trail. Because last year I kind of looked at it. Kids nowadays don't like to be called 5. So last year, my last year I changed my wording to all right, we have the 1, 2, 3, and we have 2 4s on the court. Um, so then they basically play the same position, especially when we get into our flow offense, our Euro ball screen offense. They essentially are the same person. So I switched it last year to call them both 4s, so nobody would get upset by being called 5. That's just trying to be an adapt to the new generation. Uh, but yeah, the first big down, his pace, the way he sprints to the rim. If we can pitch it ahead and get it right to him for an easy bucket, that's perfect. If not, that 4 is kind of trailing because last year I ran a lot of that um, the chase action, the snap action, the get action. I know that's all the words that I've heard to kind of describe that action. Where you the guard comes down, reverses it to the big, and immediately once they pass it, they go and go get it back, and then they get downhill. So it ends up essentially being a drag screen. But I had a 4 man last year on the EYBL who was very good, very high IQ. So now he could fake the handoff and keep it and get downhill, or go back to that same side, and we're already in our offense. Um, that's what I got it from Shrewsbury at Notre Dame when I went. He called it his snap action, but I see NBA terms used as get action. So I
So
like,
I literally just wrote down said snap action. I was
yeah,
like, okay,
yeah,
that's somebody's coined this because I
yeah.
was like, I
So
don't know.
yeah, so I tend to like when I hear about the action the first time through somebody, that's what I tend to label it. But that's one person who I've been down to watch them practice 2 or 3 times, and their practice is very high level. Shrewsbury is very down to earth guy. Like I'll send him a message on Instagram. He sent me back a whole paragraph. Actually, I sent him, I think, a YouTube video on, hey, coach, is this what you guys were doing? He's like, yep, this is what we do. Is we call it snap. And so that's what I kind of label it. And it's easy to kind of hand gesture it, especially like a peach jam when it's chaotic environment and they can't really hear me. So simple stuff where I can do with my hands is very good that I know that I've kind of grown into as a coach instead of labeling it, Indiana, Indiana, or whatever it is, where they won't be able to always hear me. And it's the shot clock's down to 20 by the time we get across the court.
I love how as coaches are we have such a unique vocabulary. We have a phrase for everything. Everything has a
Yeah.
word. Everything has a phrase, and it's so funny how like it's like, oh, like you mean this? I call it this for
Yeah.
this and this, and it's like we're talking about the same thing or maybe with a little bit wrinkled, but we all have our different names for
Yeah.
stuff. No, that's funny. And
I think there's a website I kind of looked into when I was a little bit younger. It was by, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I think he is at St. Louis now, is Zach Boisvart. That might be his last name. He's really big on social media. He always posts a lot of offensive stuff. But he had a website called the Basketball Dictionary, and it had a lot of terms. And he would have YouTube videos to go with the terms. And I really dove deep into that years ago. So I
is,
think
is
that's
is that as big as your playbook, or is there?
yeah, yeah. I wish.
uh, you're in such a unique situation, coach, with so many high level guys, and you talked and dropped about some of the recruitment and some of the places that they're going, and it's always interesting for me personally to hear about how you can bring these guys with all these individual aspirations and get them to work as a team, especially in an offense that requires a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of timing. There needs to be a lot of, good ball movement and good decision making happening. So what goes into, getting all these guys to play as a team, to play together and really, execute things specifically offensively the right way?
Yep. So on that playbook that I do for him, something I kind of made up myself was like a little statement. Basically was saying you have to sacrifice something in order for our team to be great. And I had left it blank. Like, what are you going to sacrifice for this team to be blank, to be great? And I fill it out. I have my assistant coaches fill it out. And then I go through it like my situation. Like, I'm sacrificing time with my family, to be here with you guys, and which is
Hmm.
I will never get that time back. But I'm doing this for you guys in order, for you guys to be great, to get to where you want to be. So what are you going to sacrifice? Whether it be points, whether it be time from your girlfriend at home, whether it be time from your mom, your dad, whatnot. And I think setting the tone with the playbook, like this is what you open up every time. This is what you see. All right, Coach Mike is going to have to sacrifice. I got to think about this every time I open up my playbook. So consistently seeing that, I think, kind of drills in their mind a little bit. But then, play for the name on the front, and then the name on the back will prosper. I think we preach that a lot at high school level. Um, Everybody has to buy in. Everybody has goals, but we don't reach those goals unless everybody eats. So just playing the right way, making the right play every single time down the court, making those game winning plays. I think that just has to be constantly preached to those guys, whether it be timeouts, whether it be in the film room, whether it be in the hotel rooms where we're just hanging out at dinner. Um, just yeah, I just think preaching, you just have to continue to preach it over and over and over and over and over. Because these kids are young. Like, we all been 16 at one point. It's like we all thought we knew everything. We all thought, we were the best player in the world. Um, but just preaching team first mentality always. And I think with AAU, it's different than high school. It's like I'm recruiting these guys essentially like a D1 college. I'm recruiting families. Like, if I drove up to Kalamazoo last year once our season ended, because I was looking at it big, and I had highlights of him sent to me and blah blah blah. And I got there after this game. I was like, look, man, I don't trust highlights. Like, I want to come see how you were coached. I want to see if you're being coachable. I want to see your mom in the stands. How was she acting?
Eh,
Because it all plays a part. Like,
recruiting everything, the whole
yeah,
family.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I was like I'm treating this like I'm a Division 1 head coach, just because like that's what you're gonna essentially be at the next level. Um, so because I think whether one parent can make or break your season, just like a player. Um, so putting
Yeah.
that time in, just build relationships with those guys, um, trying to make sure like everybody's here for the right reasons, I think is huge.
A couple more things, Coach. I wanted to pick your brain on, and I'm curious for you because I think a lot of coaches are um, always struggling with some of the concepts of, you know, wanting to execute on a team level and also make sure that they are spending some time or making sure they're not letting go of the individual skill set that players need to have. And one of the things that we brought up a couple times is with some of the ball screen action that you like to run, the necessity it is for guys to be able to, to be able to shoot, for guys to be able
Mhm.
to be elite shooters. Is there something that you kind of emphasize or work on to kind of, work on with your shooters? Is it something that you don't really touch or leave alone, or how do you kind of work through kind of the development and continual development of your players' individual skill set, especially when working with guys who are pretty high level?
Yeah. It's a little bit difficult on the AAU level, especially with guys who aren't local. Um, I think it's just honestly just being honest with them. Because really, I wish I had more time to, work on these guys' games in the summer, especially with trying to be at home, and then I'm leaving every single weekend. Um, so like really just being honest with them, like, hey, like if they're not the best shooter, like I think AAU is more of showcase your talents more rather than development at this point. And I think that's what a little bit what's wrong with the AAU in the United States. And so last year we were in Memphis, and every EYBL team had their specific time where players met with a guy from the NBA, um, to just talk about life and almost like a just learning opportunity for them, while the coaches went and met with an NBA guy that ran all the youth stuff, and they want to be more involved in why are we falling behind in the development aspect of basketball, in comparison to other countries. And so now the NBA is really kind of stepping in. I think now that's why we have a partnership from the EYBL and NBA, because they want to get that development aspect back into AAU. Um, which makes it, like we talked about it multiple times, it's tough when I got guys that live 5 hours away that, parents work, full-time jobs. And uh, so it's just, adjustment to all of it. Like, you got to have an open mind. I would love to work with, so and so, get his jump shot right, but what are the alternatives? Maybe just watching film, seeing what's a good shot for him and what's a bad shot for him, what his options could have been instead of shooting, three. And maybe you're wide open for a reason, is what we say. Like, what are you doing in that off season time to kind of work on your jumper?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the struggle, I guess, is that you have to, in your situation, right, where there's certain things that you're just not going to have the time or the ability to do, and as a coach, I imagine you're kind of balancing like what are the things that like we absolutely have to make sure that we're executing doing well, and what are the things that, just aren't going to be stuff that I or we as a team have time to go over. And I feel like that's tough when you're somebody like yourself, who I imagine has so many things that you want to like individually and team wise want to get down and be solid on, but there's kind of this certain part of you that has to be able to focus and be really good on certain things, and other things you, I don't want to say let go, but you
Yeah.
maybe just have to realize like, I just maybe won't have time for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what, like, we talk about. Like, when we practice, man, it's like I'm so like team focused, and it's hard to kind of crack down on individual stuff unless we can stay in the gym after, everybody has to leave. Then that's a different thing. But that's only, once a month, maybe twice if we get lucky.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, that's it's a tough situation, no, no, for sure. What is you, and this is something that I think we touched on a little bit earlier, but are you using a lot of film with your guys? Is film something, how is the process? No, I know you mentioned that you use film with your guys. What is the process of kind of having your guys use film to learn? Are you doing like film sessions after games? Are there things that you like are doing individually? I'm always curious about how coaches can kind of use film of a player of a game, and kind of have have players learn from it. So what is that like?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty cool, man. I'm, Synergy is so broken down. Hold on, my son's tapping me. Yeah.
I want to watch my
Oh, special guest.
You
I
say
love it.
hi? Yeah.
I want to watch my
Oh no.
on my stomach.
Okay, we can.
See, he might answer the question. He might know. This might have piqued his interest. He's like, I'll show you how I watch film.
Yeah, he's worried about switching his stuffy for school tomorrow.
There you go.
Um, I'm sorry, what was the question
Oh, I
again?
was asking about your players learning from their own film. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
how do
yeah.
you go through that process?
Yeah, synergy is such a blessing to have because it breaks it down to um the smallest detail of, like, all right, Mike's going left, 9% of the time, it always ends in a pull up. And so, okay, now we're in the hotel room. We're not doing anything. We're just kind of hanging out after our game. Hey, why don't you come, swing by my room? We can put up on the TV. We can watch. And I think that goes a long way because now I'm building a relationship with that kid as well, which helps me, coach him a little bit harder, which would be more honest with him, which will lead to more success. But then as a team, what we typically do is um, it depends. It is such a quick turnaround. Like, so we might play, Team Durant at 7 o'clock tonight. Then we turn around. We play, let's say Team Hero tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.
Hmm.
So it
Of the
might be,
games.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's so, like, we gotta kind of switch and go into the next game right away. And if we have time later that day, kind of go back and um, see how he played and, watch the film of it. But we will typically, gather in the coach's hotel room, put on the TV, bring the whole group of kids in. We'll pack it in, 12 deep in the one room, and it's kind of fun because that's how I built memories growing up playing AAU, is those times spent at the hotels, make sure they're behaving and everything as well. But
Well,
uh,
babysitting involved,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly, exactly. But no, we will bring them in. If we play like Team Hero tomorrow, we'll bring them in, in the morning. Say if we play at 11, we'll bring them in at like 9. Kind of go through what the starting lineup is. There are guys off the bench who are going to be playing big minutes, what they do offensively, kind of going over matchups, showing them kind of a little bit of highlights of him, like this is what he likes to do. But I think that goes a long way just because it's such a quick turnaround. And I think the kids like watching film, especially when they know how it's so much more broken down than the huddle is. Um,
Hmm.
so that's a perk that we have to take advantage of.
Well, that's awesome though that your players like want to learn. You got and there's obviously built-in buy-in with the guys that you're at, but still there's kind of that culture that a coach can set of like, hey, like this is something that we're doing. This is something that's of maximum importance. It has to be of importance to you because I don't think players naturally are looking at film constructively all the time. It's something
Yep.
that they got to learn how to watch and digest and learn from film, and when guys buy into that and understand the importance of it, man, you can see a lot of growth for players.
Oh yeah, that's what, like when we asked, like who watched film, raise your hand. Like, all right, what did you watch? Did you watch your highlights? Did you watch your 16 points you had, or did you watch, hey, about your 4 or 5 turnovers? Why did that happen? And did you watch what did you watch what mom and dad was going to call to you about the whole thing? I'm like, oh, coach should be doing this and that, or like actually being honest with you, like, you know what, you probably shouldn't have threw the ball to the other team at this time.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing we've been preaching is because, um, especially at the high school level, it's a lot of parent involvement and not necessarily always the right parent involvement.
Yeah, and
It's two battles for us that we're facing.
it's well, that's always a tough battle that we as coaches face, right? Of like, hey, parents support, parents involved. We love that they're, championing their kid and there and rooting them on and want what's best for them, but also at the same time, right? Like you want them to also be allies with you as a coach and understand
Exactly.
that like, hey, there's, nobody's perfect. There's always stuff to work on, never be satisfied and trying to balance that is a little bit of a tightrope sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, that's something I kind of, that's a part of my recruiting pitch to them is like, this is what's important to me, preparing, scouting, video, and I'm like, I'm not a perfect coach. Like, I don't know everything. I know I don't know everything. I'm not gonna always make the right decisions in the games. I'm probably gonna mess up a lot. It's part of it. Oh, okay. I'm gonna mess up a lot. But I'm being honest with you and telling you that. So when I do mess up, let's have an honest conversation about it and don't kill me, to your kids all the time. But I'm always gonna be, you know, loving your kid. I'm gonna be always there for your son. I'm gonna,
Yeah.
try to get him to where he wants to go. You'll never ever question my character, and that's the biggest thing to me is, if they look back said, oh, coach messed up a whole bunch, like we didn't necessarily agree with his offense, that's fine, but you'll never say that. I treated your son the right way, didn't have his best interest, and that I loved it, that I loved your son.
Yeah, no, I know, and that's, as a coach, that helps you go to sleep a little bit easier at night, knowing that, you had, even if it wasn't perfect, because nobody is, the intentions were there, and
Yeah.
and that you did everything that you could, and mistakes are going to happen, but I think mistakes that are made with the heart in the right place, it's a lot different than, mistakes taken with no accountability. Much different thing for sure.
Exactly.
To wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions I ask every guest, so I'll jump right in with this first one. Thinking back on your coaching career, what is a specific moment from your career that you think by sharing our listeners would be able to learn from?
I think early on, I fell in love with, watching YouTube clips. That time we talked about where I took over as a JV coach, and I was, just watching a lot of NBA stuff because I feel like that was something I thought was cool, and trying to steal from NBA sets and thinking that that was going to work for my guys. And looking back, I grew into looking at stuff that's going to fit my guys rather than stuff that I like, kind of like we talked about, and making sure that my guys are in the right place, that they're doing the right offense that's going to make them look really good rather than stuff that I love to watch. That Brad, I was really a big Brad Stevens guy when he was coaching. Um, so I watched a lot of his stuff, trying to implement that on a JV basketball level for for 2A. I'm looking back, I'm like, man, maybe this is why we struggle. We're trying to run this set where Isaiah Thomas pulled up from deep three off of, a tough contested shot. Like my JV guys are doing that. Um, so I think doing watching film that you can really implement to your player's skill set, I think is big. Um, and then just being honest with yourself, I think, and trying to go look for constructive criticism. I think early on when I was younger, I didn't want to hear negative stuff about what I was doing, especially if it was said in the wrong way. Um,
Hmm.
so now I try to go seek that. I go to, once our games get over for the EYBL, I go to our 17s coach, I go to our 15s coach. Obviously, my assistant coach is like, hey, what did I do well? What do you think I should have worked on? What do you think I should have did instead? And I just seeking that criticism, seeking that feedback, just so I can get better, I think is big.
It's kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier, right? That whole idea of like lifelong learner,
Yep.
and that always looking to get better. And it reminds me as a teacher too. I think about with my first group of students I taught and I coached. It's like, man, I wish I could apologize to you guys because I don't know what I was teaching or what I was coaching. I think I
Exactly.
thought I was doing well at the moment, but looking back, man, I've come a long way since then. But no, it's all
Exactly.
about the process of
Yeah.
being a learner for sure.
Yeah, I
Um,
said that to a couple of my kids. One kid, he was at you, who I coached. This was pre-COVID, so like 2019. I was only 24 years old. When I see him, and now he plays for DePaul, and I'm like, hey man, I wish I would have you nowadays, man. Like we would have been really good.
Yeah. It's like, oh man, if only, yeah. It would have been, it would be different now. Yeah,
Exactly.
but it's so cool though that guys like that though, like how hard they still worked, and everything, even with the guys who, like I think you said when you were like starting out, they were guys your age, right? And they were still, they'll putting in the work and listening and
Mm-hmm.
everything like that. So it speaks a lot to the character of those guys who are willing to learn from somebody who maybe looks exactly like them.
Yep, exactly.
To wrap up, Coach, I give every guest what I like to call the 60-second soapbox. You can go over 60 seconds. That's fine. I just like to put the title to it like that because it sounds nice. But I like to use it, Coach, as a way for you to get out kind of a final thought, a final message, kind of this closing idea that you want to leave the listeners with. You could take it any direction that you want, basketball-wise or coaching-wise. I'll leave that completely up to you. So, Coach, I'm just going to go ahead and open up the floor for you and just let you take it from here.
Cool. I would say something that I've been really it's been hard for me is the balance of life, and we both know coaching is a full-time job. Teaching on top of that is another full-time job. But as a coach, finding the balance in life with my wife, with both my kids now being 4 and 4 months. It was hard being a first-time dad. Now it's hard being a first-time dad of two and being a husband at the same time. But just as a coaches, just trying to find that balance in life, and don't let your home life struggle because you're putting in so much extra work, in the court and whatnot in film, and that's just kind of what my philosophy has been this past year. But yeah, that's it. And I appreciate you having me on. Like this is a great experience for me. It's only my second interview I've really ever done, so I appreciate you bringing me on and showing interest in myself, and I'm really grateful.
Well, I appreciate it, Coach. I mean, it's so much fun to hear you talk about, everything from offense to screens to the things you like to run, but also just, the experience that you get with the high level athletes that you work with. As long as the high level school that you're working at, Park Tudor, there's a lot of talent there as well, and it's gonna be fun to kind of follow your journey and see, this upcoming AAU season how it goes, where things kind of go for you in the future, because, there's a lot that you've done already in this coaching profession, a lot more that I'm sure you have to go. So, Coach Wagner, man, appreciate it a lot. Best of luck going forward, and thanks so much for coming on and chatting with us.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.